Hey everybody, and welcome back to our 3 at 3 segment. Today we want to continue the conversation about anxiety. And for those of us who have kids, we know that every single one of our kids can be different. You know, they have different fears, they have different anxieties, they have different strengths. And I want to talk for a second about a story that happened just a few days ago. My wife Jessica was going to the orthodontist with my oldest son Bennett. And as they pulled up to the orthodontist office, they noticed that there was a man kind of between the car where it was parked and the door. And this man had obviously had too much to drink, was hurting. You know, it's one of those cases where you could just visibly tell that. And my son got very scared about this situation because they were going to have to walk by this man. Yeah. Well, it turns out that the man walked a little bit further down into the parking lot, and so they were able to go inside without any kind of confrontation or anything like that. But then as they walked out, the police were actually outside with the man, which only elevated my son's anxiety. And he tends to be, that tends to be one of his things. He's the more anxious one of the bunch. And so he talked about it for the rest of the day. And as I sat down to talk with him about this situation, because Jessica said, Eddie, you probably should talk to him about this because I think it's something that's kind of hit him deeply. I said, Bennett, do you believe that God is who he says he is? Do you believe that God knew that you were going to be at the orthodontist today? And that he knew there was going to be a man outside of the car? And he, of course, his answer to all those things was yes. And I said, then do you believe that God will protect you in moments like that? And he said, well, yeah, Dad, I do. I do believe that. And that reminded me of a story in Daniel. Daniel had been praying and fasting for 21 days. And in Daniel chapter 10, it says that he had come to kind of the end of this 21 days, and it seemed as though there was no answer in sight for the things that he was praying for. He had actually received a revelation about a great war that was coming, and he was troubled. He saw the proverbial man outside the car, and he thought there was danger ahead, and so he began to fast, and he began to pray. And as he began to pray, he had done so for 21 days, and then suddenly, what can only be described as like a heavenly presence appeared to him and said, Daniel, from the very first day that you prayed, your answer was on the way. From the very first day that you cried out, that you began fasting and praying, that your answer was on the way. And what that tells me today is that God is sovereign. That God doesn't need time to sit around and think about what he should do in anxious times or in times of uncertainty. That God knows immediately what he's going to do. But also, what it tells me is that sometimes our answers get delayed or the outcomes become delayed because we're in a war. We're in a war. The Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood and like just the order of our day, but we wrestle against like spiritual forces. And so no matter what situation we find ourselves in today, we got to realize that God is in control, that any anxiousness or fear that we have is completely submissive to him, that all things, as Ephesians chapter 1 would say, works according to his plan. And that we don't have to fear because the answer is on the way. Thanks for joining us today for 3 at 3. And I hope you'll tune into our services this weekend, 9:30, 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. on Sunday. We'll rebroadcast several times throughout next week. We love you guys. We'll see you soon.